My fiancé's mother said the prenup was non-negotiable. So was my decision to walk away with her son. I met Damien at a bookstore 3 years ago. He was reading poetry in the philosophy section, completely lost. I showed him where the actual poetry was shelved. He asked for my number as a thank you. Our first date lasted 9 hours. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the eastern seaboard. The Whitmore name opened doors I didn't even know existed. Private jets, vineyard weekends, galas where champagne cost more than my monthly rent. I came from a 2-bedroom apartment where my mom worked double shifts as a dental hygienist, and my dad drove delivery trucks until his back gave out. I put myself through nursing school on scholarships and stubbornness. Damien's mother, Cordelia, tolerated me at first. She called me refreshing, authentic, a nice change from the society girls always circling her son. I thought we were building something real. Then Damien proposed with his grandmother's ring, and everything shifted. The prenup arrived by courier 3 weeks before our wedding. 47 pages of legal terms that essentially said I'd leave the marriage with exactly what I brought into it. Nothing. No matter how many years we were together, no matter how many children we had, no matter what I sacrificed for his family's empire. Cordelia scheduled a lunch to discuss it. Just us girls, she said. The restaurant had a 6-month wait list. She'd gotten us in that morning. You understand this is simply protection, she said, not looking up from her salad. For the family's interests, Damien's inheritance, his future children's security. I asked what about my security? What about the career I'd paused to raise those children? What about the years I'd give to a family that clearly saw me as a liability? She smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. You'll be provided for adequately. There's a monthly allowance outlined in Section 12. An allowance. Like I was a child. Like I was the help. I told her I wouldn't sign it. Not like this. Her smile disappeared. Then there won't be a wedding. Damien understands family comes first. He always has. That night, I showed Damien the document. Every clause that reduced me to a temporary guest in his life. Every provision that assumed I was only there for money. He read it slowly. Then he looked at me with those soft brown eyes I'd fallen in love with and said, "Can't you just sign it? For us?" Something cracked inside me. Not broke. Cracked. Because in that moment, I realized Damien had known. He'd known what his mother was planning. He'd known, and he'd let it happen. Because keeping peace with Cordelia was easier than fighting for me. I handed back his grandmother's ring that night. He cried, begged, promised he'd talk to his mother, change the terms, make it fair. But I'd seen who he was when it mattered. A man who'd let his mother dictate the terms of his love. 3 days later, I moved back into my old apartment. My mom held me while I sobbed on her couch. My dad made me pancakes at midnight and didn't ask questions. I thought that was the end of the story. It wasn't. 6 weeks later, Damien showed up at my door. He looked different, thinner, tired. In his hands was a folder. I liquidated my trust fund, he said quietly. Transferred everything to a charity for pediatric cancer research. I'm not a Whitmore heir anymore. I'm just me. He handed me the folder. Inside was a resignation letter from his family's company, a lease for a small apartment downtown, a job offer at a nonprofit. I don't want her version of my life, he said. I want ours. I didn't take him back that night, or that month. He had to prove he meant it, that this wasn't just another performance to win me over. For 8 months, I watched him rebuild himself from nothing. He worked 60-hour weeks for a fraction of what he used to spend on dinner. He called his mother once to tell her he was done. She told him he was dead to her. Last week, Damien proposed again. No ring this time, just him, on one knee, in that same bookstore where we met. I said yes. Cordelia found out yesterday, and the voicemail she left on my phone made my blood run cold. I played it 3 times before I could process what I was hearing. You think you've won something, her voice said, cold and measured. You think you've stolen my son, and that's the end of the story. But I know things about you, things that will destroy everything you've built, everything you think you deserve. I gave you a chance to walk away with dignity. You chose war instead. So be it. The message ended with a click. No goodbye, no dramatic pause, just that final surgical click. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone trembling in my hand. Damien was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something soft and off-key. He did that now, hummed. It was one of the things I'd learned about him during these 8 months of rebuilding. Rich Damien never hummed. He was too busy being perfect, being polished, being what his mother expected. This Damien, my Damien, hummed while he cooked eggs and left his socks on the bathroom floor. Babe? His voice drifted in from the kitchen. You want cream in yours? I should have told him right then. Should have walked into the kitchen, played him the voicemail, watched his face fall as his mother's venom poisoned another morning. But I didn't. I deleted the message and tucked my phone into my pocket. Just Black, I called back. I'll be out in a minute. I told myself I was protecting him, told myself he'd worked so hard to break free from her orbit, and I didn't want to drag him back in. But that was only part of the truth. The other part, the part I didn't want to examine too closely, was that I was scared. Because Cordelia didn't make empty threats. She collected ammunition. She waited. She struck when you thought you were safe. I just didn't know what ammunition she had on me. The answer came 3 days later. I was working the night shift at Metro General, the same hospital where I'd done my residency, and now worked as a registered nurse in the cardiac unit. It was 2:47 a.m. when nurse manager Rosalind pulled me aside. Rosalind was a sturdy woman in her 50s who'd seen everything the medical field could throw at a person. She'd delivered babies in elevator shafts. She'd talked down armed patients in the ER. Nothing rattled her. But that night, she looked rattled. There's been a complaint, she said quietly, leading me into her office. A formal complaint filed with the nursing board. My stomach dropped. About what? She handed me a folder. Inside was a printed document, 7 pages long, detailing an accusation of medication theft, specifically controlled substances from the cardiac unit's supply. opioids, fentanyl. The document included dates, times, and inventory discrepancies that allegedly corresponded with my shifts. This is insane, I said, my voice cracking. I've never stolen anything in my life. I know. Rosalind's face was grim. I've worked with you for 4 years. I know your character, but someone went to a lot of trouble to make this look legitimate. The board has to investigate. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Who filed this? She hesitated. The complaint was anonymous, but it came with documentation, inventory logs, access records, security footage timestamps. Someone had access to systems they shouldn't have. I thought about Cordelia's network. The Whitmore family had donated over $3 million to Metro General's new cardiac wing. Their name was literally on the building where I worked. The Cordelia Whitmore Cardiac Care Center. I'd walked past that plaque every day for 2 years and never thought twice about it. Now I understood. She'd been laying the groundwork for years, even before she knew I existed, building influence, collecting favors, positioning herself to destroy anyone who crossed her. I drove home in a daze. Damien was asleep when I got there, his face peaceful in the dim light from the street. I watched him for a long moment. This man who'd given up everything for me, his inheritance, his family, his entire identity as a Whitmore heir. And now his mother was trying to take away the one thing I had that was truly mine, my career. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, going through every shift I'd worked in the past year, every patient I'd treated, every medication I'd administered. I documented everything I could remember, building my own paper trail to counter whatever Cordelia had fabricated. By morning, I had 47 pages of notes and a headache that wouldn't quit. Damien found me there, still in my scrubs, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups. What's going on? He sat down across from me, his face creased with concern. Did something happen at work? I told him everything. The voicemail, the complaint, the administrative leave. His face went through a dozen emotions: shock, anger, guilt, and finally something that looked like resignation. I should have known, he said quietly. I should have known she wouldn't let go. This isn't your fault. It is. He ran his hands through his hair. A gesture I'd learned meant he was fighting back tears. She's my mother. I know what she's capable of. I hoped that if I walked away completely, she'd have nothing left to hold over me. But she doesn't want me back. She wants to punish me, and the best way to punish me is through you. I reached across the table and took his hand. We'll fight this. How? His voice cracked. She has lawyers, resources, connections. We have nothing. We have each other. I squeezed his fingers. And we have the truth. I never stole anything, Damien. Whatever evidence she's manufactured, it's fake. And fake evidence has holes. He looked at me with those soft brown eyes, and I saw the boy he must have been before Cordelia molded him, the boy who read poetry in wrong sections of bookstores, the boy who believed love could conquer anything. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, I said, but you're stuck with me anyway. The investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of interviews, document reviews, and waiting. 3 weeks where I couldn't work, couldn't practice the profession I'd spent years training for. My savings dwindled. My anxiety spiked. I started having nightmares about losing my license, about watching everything I'd built crumble into nothing. My parents came to visit during the second week. My mom made her famous chicken soup, the one she'd made when I was sick as a kid, and my dad fixed the leaky faucet in our bathroom that Damien had been meaning to get to for months. They didn't ask questions about the investigation. They just showed up and loved me. That woman is a piece of work, my mom said one evening, after Damien had gone to bed. We were sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. But she's not smarter than my daughter. She has money, Mom. Power. She donated millions to that hospital. Money can buy a lot of things. My mom's voice was calm, certain, but it can't buy the truth. And it can't buy the people who know you, your colleagues, your patients, the people who've watched you work for years. They know who you are. She was right. During those 3 weeks, something unexpected happened. Letters started arriving at the nursing board. Not just a few, dozens. From patients I'd cared for over the years, from their families, from doctors and fellow nurses who'd worked beside me. They wrote about my compassion, my diligence, my dedication to my patients. They wrote about the time I'd held an elderly man's hand for 3 hours while he passed because his family couldn't get there in time. The time I'd noticed a medication error that could have been fatal. The time I'd worked a double shift during a blizzard because the morning staff couldn't make it in. One letter came from a woman named Beatrice, whose husband had died in my unit 2 years ago. Nurse, my name sat with me in the chapel after Theodore passed. She wrote, she didn't have to. Her shift had ended, but she stayed for 3 more hours just so I wouldn't be alone. A woman capable of such kindness is not capable of the things she's being accused of. The investigator was a serious man named Franklin, with gray hair and tired eyes. He'd been reviewing nursing complaints for 23 years. He'd seen everything. When he called me in for my final interview, I expected the worst. Instead, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the security footage that had allegedly shown me accessing the medication cabinet at suspicious times. We had our tech team analyze these, he said. The timestamps have been digitally altered. Someone spliced together footage from different days to create a false narrative. I stared at the documents. So the evidence was fabricated. Very professionally fabricated. He leaned back in his chair. Someone with significant resources went to a lot of trouble to frame you. Any idea who might want to do that? I thought about Cordelia. About her cold smile and her surgical precision. About the way she'd told me there wouldn't be a wedding if I didn't sign her prenup. I have suspicions, I said carefully, but no proof. Franklin nodded slowly. The complaint has been dismissed. You'll be reinstated immediately with full back pay. Your record remains clean. He paused. But if you ever do find proof of who did this, I'd recommend contacting the police. Filing a false complaint with a medical licensing board is a felony. I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I called Damien, and when he answered, I could hear him holding his breath. "It's over," I said. They dismissed everything. The sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I'm coming to get you. Don't move." He picked me up in his beat-up Honda Civic, the car he'd bought when he gave up the Whitmore fleet, and we drove to the bookstore where we'd first met. It had become our place, our sanctuary. We sat in the poetry section, on the floor between shelves, and I told him everything Franklin had said. "She's not going to stop," Damien said quietly. "You know that, right? This was just the first attack." "I know. So what do we do?" I thought about it for a long moment. About Cordelia's resources, her connection, her willingness to destroy anything that threatened her control. Then I thought about my parents, about my mom's certainty that money couldn't buy truth, about my dad's quiet strength. "We live our lives," I said finally. "We get married, we build something real, and every time she tries to tear it down, we build it back up. Eventually she'll run out of ammunition, or she'll realize that we're not worth the effort." Damien shook his head. "You don't know her like I do. She never runs out of ammunition. She never stops. Then we'll never stop either." He looked at me with something like wonder. "How are you this strong?" "I'm not strong, I'm just stubborn." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "You should know that about me by now." We got married 3 months later. Not in a cathedral, not in a vineyard, not in any of the grand venues Cordelia had probably imagined for her son's wedding. We got married in my parents' backyard, under a string of lights my dad hung himself, with 43 guests who actually loved us. My mom made the cake, 3 tiers, slightly lopsided, with buttercream frosting and fresh flowers from her garden. My dad walked me down the aisle, a strip of burlap between folding chairs, and when he lifted my veil, his eyes were wet. "You take care of my girl," he said to Damien. Not a threat, a prayer. "I will, sir." Damien's voice was thick. "I promise." My best friend Jolene served as maid of honor. We'd been friends since middle school, through braces and bad boyfriends and the time she accidentally set my hair on fire at a sleepover. She'd never liked Damien at first. Too rich, too pretty, too perfect. But she'd changed her mind during those 8 months when he'd rebuilt himself. "He's real now," she told me the night before the wedding. "I can see it. The shine is gone, but what's underneath is better." Damien's best man was his former college roommate, a guy named Theodore who'd lost touch with him during the Whitmore years, but had reconnected after Damien's fall from grace. "I always knew the real Damien was in there somewhere," Theodore said in his toast. "It just took a woman brave enough to demand he show up." We didn't send Cordelia an invitation. We didn't tell her the date, but somehow she knew. The morning of the wedding, a courier arrived with a small package. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed and unsigned. "You're making a mistake. There's still time to walk away." I showed it to Damien. He read it, then tore it in half, then in quarters, then in eighths. He kept tearing until the paper was confetti in his hands. "She doesn't exist today," he said. "Today is ours." The ceremony was simple. We wrote our own vows. I promised to love him through every version of himself he became. He promised to never again choose the easy path over the right one. We exchanged rings, simple gold bands we'd picked out together at a pawn shop, and when the officiant pronounced us married, the cheer that went up from our guests was loud enough to wake the neighbors. My mom cried. My dad pretended not to cry. Jolene threw rose petals with perhaps too much enthusiasm, hitting several guests in the face. It was perfect. It was real. It was ours. That night, as we lay in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I'd sobbed over Damien 8 months earlier, I allowed myself to believe we might actually be okay. I should have known better. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks after the wedding. Damien had been working at the nonprofit for almost a year by then. It was a small organization that helped veterans transition back to civilian life, finding them housing and job training and mental health resources. He'd started in the mailroom and worked his way up to program coordinator. He loved it. For the first time in his life, his work meant something. Then the funding dried up. It happened gradually at first. A major donor pulled out, then another, then a third. Within a month, the nonprofit had lost 60% of its operating budget. The executive director, a kind woman named Vera who'd taken a chance on a former billionaire's son, called Damien into her office. "I don't understand it," she said, showing him the list of donors who'd withdrawn. These were long-term supporters. Some of them had been giving for 20 years, and suddenly, within weeks of each other, they all just stopped. Damien looked at the names. His face went pale. "I know these people," he said quietly. "They're friends of my mother." The pieces fell into place. Cordelia hadn't just been targeting me. She'd been targeting Damien too, undermining his new life, destroying the purpose he'd found outside her shadow. The nonprofit laid off half its staff. Damien was spared, barely, but his hours were cut to 20 a week. His salary dropped to barely above minimum wage. He came home that night looking like the man who'd shown up at my door with a folder of paperwork, thin and tired and hollow. "She's going to keep doing this," he said. "Every time we build something, she's going to tear it down." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to promise that we'd be okay, that love would be enough, that his mother would eventually get bored and move on. But I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. "Then we need to stop reacting and start acting," I said. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to know exactly how much power she has, what resources she controls, who's in her network. We've been playing defense this whole time, but you can't win a war by only blocking punches." Damien stared at me. "You want to investigate my mother?" "I want to know what we're up against." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I know someone who might be able to help." The someone was Damien's older brother, Philip. I'd never met Philip. He existed in Damien's stories as a distant figure, the golden child who'd done everything right, inherited the company, married the appropriate socialite, produced the appropriate heirs. But according to Damien, there was more to his brother than met the eye. Philip hates her too, Damien said as we drove to meet him. He just hides it better. He plays the game because he has to. But underneath, he's been keeping records for years. Insurance policies, he calls them. We met Philip at a coffee shop in a part of town where no one from the Whitmore circle would be caught dead. He was taller than Damien, with the same brown eyes, but a harder edge to his face. He looked at me with an appraising gaze, and I had the uncomfortable feeling of being weighed and measured. "So you're the one who got my brother to grow a spine," he said. "Not warm, not hostile, just factual." "I'm the one who loves your brother," I replied. The spine was already there. It just needed a reason to straighten. Something flickered across Philip's face. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. He turned to Damien. "You said you needed information about Mother's network, her influence, what she controls, and how she controls it." Philip pulled out a small USB drive and slid it across the table. "I've been compiling this for 15 years, since I realized what she really was." He paused. "Since father died." I felt Damien stiffen beside me. In all our time together, he'd rarely spoken about his father. The man had died when Damien was 12, supposedly of a heart attack. There had never been any suggestion of anything sinister. "What do you mean?" Damien asked carefully. Philip's eyes were cold. "I mean that father was planning to leave her. He'd found out about the affairs, the financial manipulations, the way she'd been skimming from the family company for years. He had divorce papers drawn up. He was going to take us and move to California. And then he had a heart attack. Philip's voice was flat. Convenient timing, wasn't it? A perfectly healthy 53-year-old man, no history of cardiac issues, drops dead 2 days before he was supposed to file for divorce. The implications hung in the air like smoke. I felt sick. "Are you saying she killed him?" Damien's voice cracked. "I'm saying I've never been able to prove she didn't." Philip stood up. "Everything I know is on that drive. Financial records, communications, a list of everyone who owes her favors and why. Use it carefully. If she finds out you have it, she'll destroy you." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you got out, little brother. I hope you stay out." He walked away without looking back. We sat in the coffee shop for another hour, not speaking. The USB drive sat between us like a bomb waiting to go off. Finally, Damien picked it up and tucked it into his pocket. "Whatever's on here," he said quietly. "There's no going back once we look at it. I know. She's my mother. Despite everything, she's still my mother." I took his hand. "You don't have to look. We can throw the drive away right now. Forget Philip ever gave it to us. Keep living our lives and dealing with her attacks as they come." He shook his head slowly. "No, I need to know. I've spent my whole life being afraid of her, letting her control me, making excuses for her behavior. If there's something on here that explains who she really is, I need to see it." We went home. We plugged in the drive. And the truth about Cordelia Whitmore unfolded before us. The files were meticulously organized, dating back 30 years. Philip had been thorough, obsessive even. There were financial records showing hidden accounts, shell companies, money flowing in patterns that made no legitimate sense. There were emails, forwarded by sources Philip never identified, revealing affairs with business partners, threats to employees, bribes to politicians. But the worst files were about the marriages. Damien's father wasn't Cordelia's first husband. He was her third. Her first husband, a man named Elliot, had died in a boating accident 2 years into their marriage. Cordelia had inherited his family's manufacturing business. Her second husband, Gerald, had died from accidental poisoning, bad oysters at a restaurant. 3 years later, she'd inherited his real estate holdings. Then came Damien's father, Richard, the hotel empire, the heart attack that came at the most convenient possible moment. 3 husbands, I said, staring at the screen. 3 dead husbands, all with convenient timing. Damien was pale, his hands trembling. "This can't be real. Philip must be wrong. These must be coincidences." 3 coincidences? People die, accidents happen. But his voice was hollow. He didn't believe it any more than I did. I kept scrolling through the files. There was more, so much more. Cordelia had used her influence to destroy businesses that competed with her interests. She'd ruined the careers of employees who crossed her. She'd spread rumors that ended marriages, leaked information that caused suicides, manipulated markets in ways that were certainly illegal if anyone had the power to investigate. And at the center of it all, holding everything together, was a network of people who owed her. Politicians, judges, police commissioners, hospital administrators, newspaper editors. She had leverage on all of them. Secrets they didn't want exposed, favors they couldn't refuse. "She's untouchable," Damien whispered. "Even with all this evidence, who would we take it to? The police commissioner owes her. The district attorney owes her. The journalists who might expose her owe her." He was right. The scope of Cordelia's power was staggering. She'd spent decades building an empire of influence, and anyone who might challenge her was already in her pocket. But then I saw something in the files that made me pause. A name I recognized. Franklin Webb, the investigator who'd cleared me of the nursing complaint, the one who'd found the fabricated evidence. According to Philip's files, Franklin's wife had been treated for cancer at a hospital that Cordelia donated to heavily. The treatment had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Somehow, all the bills had been mysteriously waived. Franklin owed her too, but he'd cleared me anyway. He'd looked at the evidence and done the right thing, even though it meant defying someone who had leverage over him, which meant Cordelia's network wasn't as solid as it seemed. Not everyone she owned was completely owned. Some of them might be looking for a way out. "Damien," I said slowly, What if we're thinking about this wrong? What do you mean? We've been focused on fighting Cordelia directly, taking her head on, but she's too powerful for that. Her network is too vast. I pointed at Franklin's name on the screen. But networks are only as strong as the people in them, and people who feel trapped, people who've been forced to do things they're ashamed of. Those people might want to be free. You want to turn her own network against her. I want to give them a choice. She's kept them in line through leverage, through fear. But if enough of them stand up at once, if there's safety in numbers. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. It could work, but it's dangerous. If she finds out what we're doing before we're ready, I know, she'll destroy us. Not just our careers, our lives, our families, everything. I know. He looked at me with those soft brown eyes. The boy from the bookstore, the man who'd given up everything for love. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about my mom, making soup in my kitchen because she couldn't fix anything else. I thought about my dad, fixing leaky faucets because that's how he showed love. I thought about the patients I'd cared for, the letters they'd written, the career Cordelia had tried to steal from me. I thought about every woman who'd been told to sign a prenup or else. Every person who'd been crushed under the weight of someone else's power. I'm sure, I said. And so began the dismantling of Cordelia Whitmore. It started slowly, carefully. We couldn't afford to make mistakes. The first person I approached was Franklin. We met at a diner across town, far from any Whitmore properties. He was reluctant at first, defensive. He insisted he'd cleared me because the evidence was clearly fabricated, not because of any moral awakening. I don't know what you're talking about, he said when I mentioned his wife's medical bills. I'm not accusing you of anything. I kept my voice calm. I'm thanking you. You did the right thing even though it was hard. Even though there might have been pressure to do otherwise. He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, the pressure was immense. I got calls, visits, suggestions about what the appropriate outcome should be. He looked at me with tired eyes. But I've been in this job for 23 years. I've seen what happens when people start bending the truth for powerful people. It destroys everything, including themselves. And if you had the chance to make sure she could never pressure anyone again, he studied me carefully. You're playing a dangerous game. I know. She's connected to people you can't imagine. Politicians, police, judges. I know. And you think you can take her down? I think I have to try. Franklin was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. There's a journalist at the Tribune, Miranda Lacey. She's been trying to write about the Whitmore family for years, but every time she gets close to something, her sources dry up. Advertisers threaten to pull out. Her editors get nervous. He slid the card across the table. She'd be interested in whatever you have. I took the card. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He stood up to leave. Thank me when this is over and we're both still standing. Miranda Lacey was exactly what I expected an investigative journalist to look like. Sharp eyes, sensible shoes, a perpetual coffee stain on her sleeve. We met at her cluttered office at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, because that's when the good stories happen. Cordelia Whitmore. She said the name like it was a disease. I've been circling that woman for 15 years. Every time I think I have something solid, it evaporates. Sources recant. Documents disappear. My editor suddenly decides we have higher priorities. What if I had documentation? Real documentation. Financial records, communications, evidence of criminal activity going back decades? Her eyes lit up. Where did you get it? Does it matter? It matters for verification. I can't publish anything I can't confirm independently. I thought about Philip, about the risk he'd taken giving us that drive. I'll tell you the source if you agree to protect them. Completely. Even from me, if it comes to that. Miranda nodded slowly. I can work with that. I handed her a copy of the drive. Not the whole thing. We'd held some files back as insurance, but enough to give her a starting point. She plugged it into her computer and started scrolling. After about 10 minutes, she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. This is explosive, she said quietly. If even half of this is verifiable, we're talking about the biggest corruption story this city has seen in decades. Can you verify it? Give me 3 months. I gave her 3 months. During that time, Damien and I kept our heads down. He worked his reduced hours at the nonprofit. I went back to work at the hospital, now even more aware of the Cordelia Whitmore Cardiac Care Center plaque I passed every day. We lived quietly, carefully, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped in the form of an eviction notice. Our apartment building, it turned out, had been purchased by a shell company 3 weeks after our wedding. The new owners cited structural concerns and gave all residents 60 days to vacate. Structural concerns that had somehow never been mentioned in the building's 40-year history. We found a new apartment, smaller and farther from both our workplaces. A month later, that building was also purchased. Same story, different shell company. By the 4th apartment in 6 months, we stopped being surprised. We just kept moving, keep rebuilding, kept waiting. She's trying to wear us down, Damien said one night as we unpacked boxes in yet another cramped studio. Make us so tired of running that we give up. Is it working? He looked around at our meager possessions, the same boxes we'd packed and unpacked 4 times now. Then he looked at me. No, because I wake up next to you every morning, and that's worth more than any apartment. I kissed him. We made love on an air mattress because our bed frame hadn't arrived yet. It was awkward and uncomfortable and perfect. Miranda called 6 weeks later. I verified everything, she said. And I found more. A lot more. This is going to be the biggest story of my career. She paused. But I need to warn you about something. What? When this story breaks, Cordelia's going to know exactly where it came from. She's going to come after you with everything she has. I know. I'm talking about more than evictions. More than job sabotage. I'm talking about the kind of retaliation that ruins lives. That ends them. I thought about the files. The 3 dead husbands. The convenient accidents, the suspicious timing. I know, I said again. Print it anyway. The story ran on a Sunday morning, front page above the fold. Whitmore empire built on decades of corruption, manipulation, and suspicious deaths. Miranda had outdone herself. She'd verified everything on the drive and added her own research. Financial crimes, tax evasion, bribery, and the deaths, Elliot, Gerald, Richard, presented not as accusations, but as questions that demanded investigation. By noon, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. By evening, the district attorney had announced a formal investigation. By the next morning, 3 of Cordelia's political allies had publicly distanced themselves from her. The empire was cracking, but Cordelia wasn't finished yet. The call came at 2 a.m., 4 days after the story broke. Not to my phone, to my parents' phone. My mom's voice was shaking when she answered. She didn't say much, just that there had been a fire. Their house, the house where I'd grown up, the house where they'd held my wedding in the backyard 3 months ago. Damien and I drove through the night to get there. By the time we arrived, there was nothing left but smoldering wreckage and yellow caution tape. My parents were standing across the street, wrapped in shock blankets provided by paramedics. My mom was crying. My dad was just staring at the ruins, his face blank. It started in the garage, the fire marshal told us. Electrical fault, it looks like, but we're still investigating. Electrical fault. In a house where my dad had rewired the entire electrical system himself, up to code, just 5 years ago. I held my mom while she sobbed. I watched my dad's blank face slowly crumble into grief. Everything they'd owned was gone. 40 years of memories, photo albums, my mom's recipe cards handwritten by her mother, my dad's tools, collected over a lifetime. And I knew, with absolute certainty, who was responsible. She went after my family, I said to Damien later, sitting in a motel room while my parents slept in the adjoining room. Not me, not you, my family. I'm so sorry. His voice was broken. This is my fault. All of this is my fault. No. I grabbed his face, forced him to look at me. This is her fault. Cordelia's fault, not yours. You didn't burn down my parents' house. You didn't fabricate evidence against me. You didn't try to destroy our lives. She did. But if you'd never met me, then I never would have known what real love felt like, and I never would have had the courage to stand up to someone like her. I kissed him. I don't regret you, Damien. I never will. The fire changed things. Up until that point, we'd been playing defense, protecting ourselves, hoping the legal system would take care of Cordelia once the truth came out. But watching my parents lose everything, watching my mom weep over the ashes of her mother's recipes, something shifted inside me. I was done waiting. I called Franklin. I called Miranda. I called everyone on the list of people Cordelia had leverage over, everyone who might be looking for a way out. I told them about the fire. I told them what she was capable of. I told them that if we didn't stop her now, none of us would ever be safe. And one by one, they started talking. The hospital administrator who'd been pressured to falsify my records came forward first. Then a politician who'd been taking bribes for years and was tired of living in fear. Then a police detective who'd helped cover up one of Cordelia's husband's deaths and had been carrying the guilt for 2 decades. The trickle became a flood. Within a month, the district attorney had enough evidence to bring charges. Real charges. Not just financial crimes, but conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and, most damning of all, 3 counts of murder. Cordelia was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I watched it on the news, sitting in the motel room that had become our temporary home. The footage showed her being led out of her mansion in handcuffs, her face composed into an expression of dignified outrage. But I saw something else in her eyes, something I'd never seen before: fear. The trial lasted 8 months. Cordelia hired the best lawyers money could buy. She deployed every connection, every favor, every piece of leverage she'd accumulated over decades. Her defense team attacked the credibility of every witness, questioned every piece of evidence, spun elaborate alternative explanations for every damning fact. It wasn't enough. The jury deliberated for 6 days. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was steady as she read the verdicts. Guilty on 12 counts of financial fraud. Guilty on 8 counts of bribery. Guilty on 5 counts of obstruction of justice. And guilty on 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree, for the death of Richard Whitmore, Damien's father. The other 2 deaths couldn't be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Too much time had passed. Too much evidence had been lost or destroyed. But one was enough. One was enough to send Cordelia Whitmore to prison for the rest of her natural life. I held Damien's hand as the verdicts were read. He was crying. Not with joy, not with triumph, but with something more complicated. Grief, maybe. For the mother he'd lost twice. Once when he chose me over her empire, and again when the truth revealed who she really was. "Are you okay?" I whispered. He shook his head. "I don't know. I don't think I'll know for a long time." The sentencing came 3 weeks later. Life without parole. As the bailiffs led Cordelia away, she turned and looked directly at me. Her eyes were cold, empty, defeated, but she smiled. That same smile that never reached her eyes. "This isn't over," she mouthed, and then she was gone. We rebuilt. Not quickly, not easily, but piece by piece, day by day, we put our lives back together. My parents got an insurance settlement that covered the cost of a modest new house, not as big as the old one, but cozy, safe. My dad built a new workshop in the garage. My mom planted a garden. Damien's nonprofit received an anonymous donation that restored their funding. He suspected Philip, but never confirmed it. He went back to full-time work, eventually becoming the executive director when Vera retired. I continued working at Metro General, though I transferred to a different unit. Walking past the Cordelia Whitmore Cardiac Care Center every day felt wrong now. The hospital eventually renamed it, a quiet acknowledgement that some names carry too much baggage. Philip and Damien reconnected. Slowly, cautiously, but genuinely, Philip took over the Whitmore hotel chain and began the long process of cleaning house, firing the executives who'd enabled Cordelia, donating to charities she'd victimized, rebuilding the family name into something worth having. "You should come work for me," Philip told Damien once. "Help me fix what she broke." Damien considered it for a long moment, then shook his head. "I'm good where I am, but thank you." We bought a house eventually. A small Victorian in a quiet neighborhood, with a backyard big enough for a garden and a porch where we could sit and watch the sunset. We adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt named Biscuit, who had been abandoned at a shelter and somehow survived. He seemed appropriate. 2 years after the trial, I got pregnant. We hadn't been trying exactly, but we hadn't been preventing either. When the test came back positive, I sat in our bathroom for 20 minutes, staring at the 2 pink lines, trying to process what they meant. A child, our child. A life that would carry pieces of both of us, pieces of my stubborn working-class parents, and pieces of the Whitmore legacy, for better or worse. I thought about Cordelia's prenup, the clause about future children, the assumption that any child I bore would belong to the empire first, to me, second, and I laughed, actually laughed, sitting there on the bathroom floor, because Cordelia had been so afraid that I'd use her son's children to steal from her family. And now here I was, pregnant with a Whitmore baby, and the Whitmore empire she'd built, the one she'd killed for, was being systematically dismantled by her own surviving son. She'd feared the wrong thing. She'd feared losing money, losing control, losing the legacy she'd murdered to build. She should have feared losing love, because in the end, that was what destroyed her. Not investigators or journalists or courtrooms. Love, Damien's love for me, Philip's love for his brother, even in a strange way, Richard's love for his sons. The love that had made him plan an escape all those years ago, before Cordelia silenced him forever. I told Damien about the pregnancy that evening. He cried, happy tears this time, the kind that streamed down his face while he laughed and held me and promised our child would never know the cold that had shaped his childhood. "We're going to be good parents," he said. "Not perfect, but good." "How do you know?" "Because we know what bad looks like, and we've both decided to be something different." Our daughter was born on a rainy Thursday in October. She came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious, and when the nurse placed her in my arms, I understood for the first time what my parents must have felt when they held me. This is what matters. Everything else, the money, the power, the status, is just noise. This small, perfect, screaming thing is the whole point. We named her Rosalie, after my grandmother. My dad cried when we told him. My mom made a blanket covered in roses. Cordelia died in prison when Rosalie was 3 years old. Natural causes, the report said. Her heart simply gave out one night. There was a certain poetry to that. The heart she'd hardened over decades finally failing her. Damien attended the funeral. I offered to go with him, but he said he needed to do it alone. He was gone for 2 days. When he came back, his eyes were red, but his shoulders were lighter. "Did you forgive her?" I asked. He thought about it for a long time. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive her, but I think I finally understand her. She was afraid. Her whole life she was terrified. Of being powerless, of being abandoned, of losing control. And that fear made her into a monster." He paused. "I was afraid too, for a long time. Afraid of losing her approval. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of what she'd do if I stepped out of line. And that fear almost made me into a monster too. The version of me who asked you to just sign the prenup, that was her monster, her creation. But you chose differently, because you showed me another way." He took my hand. "You showed me that love doesn't have to be earned through obedience. That family doesn't have to mean control. That being brave isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do the right thing anyway." Rosalie toddled into the room at that moment, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. She climbed into Damien's lap and demanded a story. He obliged, his voice shifting into the animated tones of a practiced father, and I watched them together. My husband and my daughter, the family I'd fought for, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. After everything, finally, peace. There's more to the story, of course. There always is. Philip married a woman named Genevieve who challenged him in all the right ways. They had twins, and suddenly Rosalie had cousins to play with at holiday gatherings. My parents grew older but stayed active, babysitting Rosalie every weekend so Damien and I could have date nights. Biscuit lived to the ripe old age of 14 before passing quietly in his sleep, and we buried him in the backyard with full honors. My career flourished. I eventually became head nurse of my unit, then transitioned into nursing education, training the next generation. I told my students about the importance of documentation, of integrity, of doing the right thing even when powerful people pressure you to do otherwise. I never told them the whole story. That felt too personal, but I hoped the lesson came through anyway. Damien became a respected figure in the nonprofit world. He spoke at conferences about the importance of second chances, about breaking free from toxic family systems, about building purpose outside of inherited wealth. People who knew his history were sometimes skeptical, but those who worked with him saw the change was real. And Rosalie grew. She had Damien's soft brown eyes and my stubborn streak. She loved books, reading them, writing them, building towers out of them when she was feeling mischievous. She asked endless questions about everything and had no patience for answers that didn't make sense. When she was 7, she found an old photo of Cordelia in a box we'd never gotten around to throwing away. "Who's this?" she asked, studying the image of the elegant woman with the cold smile. Damien and I looked at each other. We'd known this conversation was coming. We'd talked about how to handle it. "That's your grandmother," Damien said carefully. "My mother. Where is she?" "She's not alive anymore." Rosalie considered this. "Did she make you sad?" Damien was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. She made a lot of people sad. She didn't know how to love without hurting. That's silly, Rosalie said matter-of-factly. Love isn't supposed to hurt. I pulled her into my lap. You're exactly right, sweetheart. Love isn't supposed to hurt. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her book. But later that night, she crawled into our bed, something she rarely did anymore, and curled up between. I love you, she whispered, and it doesn't hurt at all. I held my daughter. I held my husband's hand across her small body. And I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The prenup that started it all. The crack that formed when Damien asked me to just sign it. The months of rebuilding. The fire. The fear. The fight. Cordelia's empire, crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. And I realized that Cordelia had been right about one thing. The day she told me there wouldn't be a wedding if I didn't sign the prenup. She'd been right that I was making a choice. She just hadn't understood what the choice really was. It wasn't about money or inheritance or protecting the family interests. It was about deciding who I wanted to be, what kind of love I was willing to accept, what I was willing to fight for. She thought she was offering me a test. Sign the document, prove your loyalty, become one of us. But the real test was different. The real test was whether I would stand up for myself, even when it cost me everything. Whether I would choose integrity over comfort, love over security, truth over acceptance. I passed that test. And so did Damien. And every day since then, we've kept passing it. Every time we choose honesty over convenience. Every time we admit when we're wrong. Every time we put our daughter's well-being above our own desires. Every time we remember that love is a verb, not a transaction. Cordelia built her empire on control, on fear, on the assumption that everyone could be bought, everyone could be leveraged, everyone had a price. We built ours on something different, on trust, on vulnerability, on the radical belief that you can build a life with someone without needing an insurance policy against their betrayal. And you know what? Our way is better. I still have the voicemail somewhere. The one Cordelia left the day after she found out Damien proposed again. The one that made my blood run cold. I never deleted it. I don't know why. Maybe I keep it as a reminder of how far we've come. Maybe I keep it as evidence of who she was, in case I ever start to doubt my memory. Maybe I keep it because some part of me needs proof that we survived something. I listened to it recently, for the first time in years. Rosalie was at school, Damien was at work, and I was alone in our house. The house we'd built, the life we'd created. And I pressed play. You think you've won something. You think you've stolen my son, and that's the end of the story. But I know things about you. Things that will destroy everything you've built. Everything you think you deserve. I gave you a chance to walk away with dignity. You chose war instead. So be it. Her voice was cold, controlled, absolutely certain of her own power. She was wrong about everything. I hadn't stolen her son. He'd chosen me, chosen us, chosen a life where love meant more than leverage. She didn't know things about me. She manufactured them, fabricated evidence, manipulated systems. And when the truth came out, her fabrications crumbled like the empire she'd built them to protect. The war she'd declared didn't end the way she expected. It ended with her in prison and us in this house, with our daughter and our dog and our quiet, beautiful, ordinary life. I deleted the voicemail, finally, after all these years. And then I went to pick up Rosalie from school. She came running out the doors, backpack bouncing, face lit up with whatever adventure the day had brought. She grabbed my hand and started talking about her friend Marguerite, about the book they were reading in class, about the caterpillar she'd found on the playground. I listened to every word. I memorized the way her hand felt in mine. I thanked whatever force in the universe had led me to that bookstore 3 years before my life changed, had led me to the poetry section where a lost man was reading philosophy, had set in motion the chain of events that brought me here. Damien once asked me how I could be so strong. The answer is that I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn. I'm just a girl from a 2-bedroom apartment who put herself through nursing school on scholarships and stubbornness, who fell in love with a rich boy who fell in love with her back, who refused to be diminished by someone else's prenup. I didn't win because I was stronger than Cordelia. I won because I was willing to lose, willing to walk away from the ring, the wedding, the life of luxury, willing to let Damien prove himself over 8 long months, willing to rebuild 4 times when she kept knocking us down. She couldn't beat me because I had nothing she could take. My value wasn't in my bank account or my social standing or my connections. It was in my integrity, my stubbornness, my love. And those things can't be taken. They can only be given away. I never gave them away. Neither did Damien. Neither will our daughter. That's the legacy we're building. Not money, not power. Not an empire of hotels and shell companies and leveraged favors, just a family that loves each other. Just a life that matters. It's enough. More than enough. It's everything. Sometimes, late at night, when Damien is asleep and the house is quiet, I walk through the rooms of our home, past Rosalie's bedroom, where she sleeps surrounded by books, past the kitchen, where Damien's coffee cup sits in the sink from the morning, past the living room, where Biscuit's old bed still sits in the corner because we can't quite bring ourselves to move it. And I think about the woman I was before all this. The woman who worked double shifts and lived in a cramped apartment and thought love stories were for other people, richer people, luckier people, people who didn't have to fight for every inch of ground. I think about the woman I became, a fighter, a survivor, a wife and mother and nurse and friend, someone who learned that the best things in life aren't the things that come easy. They're the things you have to build, brick by brick, from the rubble of whatever tried to destroy you. And I think about the woman I'm still becoming, because the story isn't over. Stories never really end. They just continue in different forms, different chapters, different hands. Rosalie will have her own battles to fight, her own Cordelias to face. I can't protect her from that, but I can show her how to stand, how to refuse what diminishes her, how to love without losing herself. That's what parents do, I think. We don't give our children perfect lives. We give them the tools to build their own. We show them by example what it looks like to fall down and get back up, what it looks like to choose love over fear, what it looks like to say no to a 47-page prenup and yes to a life of uncertainty and struggle and joy, what it looks like to be brave. My mom calls me every Sunday. We talk about nothing important, recipes, weather, whatever show she's watching, but underneath the small talk is something bigger, a lifetime of love expressed in the only language my family knows, showing up, holding on, being there. My dad is teaching Rosalie to use tools. He started her on a hammer and nails when she was 5, and now at 7 she's building birdhouses, crooked, imperfect birdhouses that fall apart in strong wind. But she made them herself, and that's what matters. Damien is writing a memoir. He doesn't talk about it much, but sometimes I catch him at his desk late at night, typing slowly, looking at the screen with an expression I can't quite read. I don't ask what it says. When he's ready, he'll share it. That's how we work now, not demanding access to each other's inner lives, but trusting that the doors will open when the time is right. We're not perfect. We fight about stupid things, dishes, schedules, whether Rosalie should have a phone. We go to therapy not because we're broken, but because we know how easy it would be to become broken. We've seen it. We've lived it. We're committed to being different, and we are different. Not in spite of Cordelia, because of her. She was the fire that forged us, the pressure that revealed what we were made of, the test we didn't know we were taking until we'd already passed. I hate her for what she did. I'll always hate her for the fire, for the fabricated charges, for the years of harassment, for the 3 men she probably murdered. But I also understand, in a strange way, that she made me who I am, that without her cruelty, I never would have discovered my own strength. It's complicated. Most true things are. Damien feels it too. He loved his mother, in the way children always love their parents, even when those parents are monsters. He grieves her still, not the real Cordelia, but the mother she might have been if fear hadn't twisted her into something unrecognizable. He grieves the relationship they never had, the conversations they never will, but he doesn't let that grief define him. He carries it, acknowledges it, makes space for it. And then he goes to work, kisses his daughter, holds his wife, lives his life. That's healing. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of meaning despite the pain. We have meaning. So much meaning. In our marriage, our family, our work, our small, beautiful, ordinary life. Cordelia had money, power, control, an empire that spanned the eastern seaboard. We have each other. We win. The last time I visited my parents' new house, my mom showed me something she'd found in a box they'd been storing at my aunt's place, one of the few boxes that survived the fire. It was a photo from their wedding. My mom in a simple white dress, my dad in a suit that didn't quite fit. They were standing in front of a tiny church, squinting into the sun, grinning like idiots. We had $40 between us, my mom said. We drove to Vegas because we couldn't afford a real wedding. We ate at a diner on the way back and split a plate of pancakes. Were you scared? She laughed, terrified. I had no idea if we'd make it, if we could build a life together, if love was enough. She looked at the photo with soft eyes. But we tried anyway. And here we are, 52 years later. I thought about my own wedding, the backyard ceremony, the homemade cake, the 43 guests who actually loved us. Not so different from a Vegas chapel and split pancakes. How did you know? I asked. How did you know it was worth the risk? My mom looked at me with the expression she always got when she was about to say something important. I didn't know. That's the whole point. You don't get to know in advance. You just have to decide what you believe in and then bet everything on it. She squeezed my hand. You did good, baby girl. You bet on the right thing. I drove home that evening, through streets I'd known my whole life, past landmarks of my childhood, the elementary school, the library, the park where I'd had my first kiss with a boy whose name I can't remember. I thought about the girl I'd been, growing up in that 2-bedroom apartment, dreaming of something more. I'd wanted adventure, romance, a life bigger than what I'd known. I got all of that, just not in the way I'd imagined. The adventure wasn't glamorous. It was terrifying. It was fighting to keep my nursing license. It was watching my parents' house burn. It was being evicted 4 times in 6 months. It was wondering some nights if we'd made a terrible mistake. The romance wasn't a fairy tale. It was hard work. It was therapy and difficult conversations and learning to fight fair. It was watching Damien cry at his mother's funeral and not knowing how to help. It was being imperfect, together, for the rest of our lives. And the life I dreamed of, the bigger-than-ordinary life, wasn't about money or status or power. It was about love, real love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or clauses, the kind that survives fire and fraud and decades of poison. Cordelia's prenup had 47 pages of terms. Ours had none. I pulled into our driveway as the sun was setting. Damien's car was already there. Through the window, I could see Rosalie jumping on the couch while Damien pretended to chase her. They were both laughing. I sat in the car for a moment, just watching, just breathing, just being grateful. Then I went inside to join my family, because in the end, that's what it all comes down to. Not the battles you win or the enemies you defeat. Not the empires you build or the legacies you leave. Just the people you love, and the choice to keep loving them, every single day. I chose Damien. He chose me. We chose each other, over and over, through every obstacle Cordelia threw at us. And we'll keep choosing, for as long as we have. That's the real victory. The one no prenup can protect against, no fire can destroy, no empire can outlast. Love, freely given. Love, stubbornly held. Love, the non-negotiable that saved us both. 15 years later, Rosalie came home from college for Thanksgiving with a boy she wanted us to meet. His name was Isaiah. He was tall and nervous and clearly terrified of us, which I found endearing. He helped my dad fix the garbage disposal without being asked. He complimented my mom's sweet potatoes 3 separate times. He looked at Rosalie like she'd hung the moon. I like him, Damien said quietly as we watched them through the kitchen window. They were in the backyard, walking through my mom's garden, their heads close together. Because he fixed the garbage disposal? Because he looks at her the way I look at you. I smiled and leaned into his shoulder. His hair was graying now, distinguished silver at his temples. Mine too, though I pretended not to notice. We were older, slower, more tired than we used to be, but we were still us. That evening after dinner, Rosalie found me alone in the kitchen. She was 20 now, confident in ways I hadn't been at her age, but I could see the uncertainty flickering beneath her surface. Mom, she said carefully, Isaiah wants to ask you and Dad something. My heart clenched. I knew what was coming. I'd known the moment I saw them together. Isaiah asked for our blessing to propose. Damien gave it, tears streaming down his face. I gave it too after making Isaiah promise, truly promise, that he understood what marriage meant. That he understood it wasn't about ownership or control or financial security. That it was about choosing someone, every single day even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. I understand, he said. His eyes were steady. His voice was sheer. He reminded me in that moment of Damien, not the polished heir I'd first met, but the man who'd shown up at my door with a folder full of proof that he was willing to give up everything. The man who'd rebuilt himself from nothing. The man who'd chosen love over legacy. They got married the following spring. It was a bigger wedding than ours. Rosalie wanted a venue, a photographer, a proper band, but it was still recognizably theirs. Personal, meaningful, full of people who actually loved them. Damien gave a toast. He talked about what marriage had taught him, about fear and courage, about choosing to be brave every single day. My mother once tried to dictate the terms of my love, he said. She handed me a 47-page prenup and expected me to accept it without question. I almost did. I almost lost everything that mattered because I was afraid to stand up for what I believed in. He looked at Rosalie, his eyes wet. But your mother taught me something. She taught me that love isn't a contract. It can't be negotiated. It can't be protected against. It can only be given, freely, completely, without conditions. He raised his glass. To Rosalie and Isaiah, may your love be as stubborn as your grandmother's, as brave as your mother's, as real as everything we've built together. I cried. Everyone cried. And then we danced. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the venue had emptied, I stood alone on the balcony, looking out at the stars. Rosalie and Isaiah had left for their honeymoon. Damien was inside, saying goodbye to Philip and Genevieve. My parents had gone home hours ago, tired but happy. I thought about Cordelia, about the war she'd declared all those years ago, about the empire she'd tried to protect, the legacy she'd tried to preserve, the control she'd tried to maintain. She'd lost everything, her money, her power, her freedom, her life. I'd gained everything. A husband who loved me, a daughter who was becoming an incredible woman, parents who'd shown me what family really meant, a career that mattered, a life that was full. And standing there, under those stars, I finally understood something I'd been circling for years. Cordelia's prenup wasn't about money, not really. It was about fear. She was terrified of losing control, of being betrayed, of loving someone and having it cost her something. So she built walls, drafted documents, created systems of control that promised to protect her from the vulnerability of real connection. But walls don't protect you from loneliness. Documents don't save you from yourself. Control is an illusion that shatters the moment someone refuses to play your game. I'd refused to play. And in refusing, I'd freed us both, Damien and me. We'd built something real, something that didn't need protecting because it wasn't built on fear. Cordelia died alone in a prison cell, surrounded by guards who didn't care about her, mourned by sons who'd spent their lives trying to escape her shadow. I would die, someday, hopefully many years from now, surrounded by the people I loved, by the family I'd built, by the legacy that mattered. Not money, not power, not an empire of hotels and shell companies, just love, stubborn, brave, unconditional love, the non-negotiable that changed everything. Damien joined me on the balcony, his hand finding mine in the darkness. What are you thinking about? He asked. Your mother. He was quiet for a moment, then, do you still hate her? I considered the question, really considered it. No, I said finally. I don't hate her anymore. I feel sorry for her. She was so afraid of being hurt that she never let herself be loved, and that's the saddest thing I can imagine. He squeezed my hand. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to refuse her, for being patient enough to let me figure out who I wanted to be, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. He turned to face me, his eyes reflecting the starlight. For giving me this life. I kissed him, slowly, tenderly, the same way I'd kissed him that first night, after our 9-hour date, the same way I'd kiss him until the end. You gave me this life too, I said. We built it together. We stood there for a while longer, watching the stars, holding hands, being quiet, being married, being us. Eventually we went home, to our house, to our life, and we lived happily ever after. Not because everything was perfect, not because we never fought or struggled or faced challenges, but because we chose each other. Every single day. Through everything. That's what happily ever after really means. It means choosing. It means staying. It means love. The non-negotiable kind. The only kind worth having.